I am Jim Collison and live from the Gallup Studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Called to Coach, recorded on July 27th, 2018. Called to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during this live webcast, we do have a chat room that's available for you right below the main video window. The interns tried to move that, by the way, and I'm like, no, you can't do that. I've done 200 videos where I've done this. So we left that chat room available for you. Log in, bottom left-hand corner, choose the guest account, put your name in where it says guest, take those numbers out. Hit submit, and especially important today, we're going to be taking some live questions from you. So jump into the chat room. Love to have you out there. We've got, 15 or 20 of you so far out there. Today would be a great day to ask your questions. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions for us directly, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, and we'd love to have those questions back from you. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strength Center, just gallupstrengthcenter.com for all your Clifton Strengths coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video and downloadable audio streaming as well, but we call that podcasting now. You can get all the links to that are available for all the platforms, all the devices on our newly redesigned coaches blog. Head out to coaching.gallup.com. Dean Jones is our host today. Dean works as a principal architect of Gallup's global client learning strategy. Dean, great to have you back on Called to Coach, and welcome.
Thanks, Jim. It's great to be here.
Great.
I always love doing Called to Coach. It's always a blast.
We like having you. A lot of folks during the summit had kind of just mentioned they've really appreciated these sessions that you bring. We're in part 3 of a 3-part series. Hopefully it was a part 1. It became a part 2. It's now part 3, which is really, really awesome that we have that kind of material to do. But as we think about part 3, we're going to cover some things. And you also are going to take some questions here at the end. Talk a little bit about what you're looking for on those questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. I feel like this is turning into Game of Thrones.
Nobody dies in this version.
Nobody dies, but it definitely goes on forever. And there's a lot of characters. So yeah. So the here's literally where this all came from. If you've been following along here, we did a couple Called to Coaches back in the fall of 2016 on leading effective strengths trainings. And I will tell you, after doing that, it was kind of the basics. I did one on kind of what content to include, what are the basics of the content to include. We did another one on delivery, and just had a bunch of coaches who said, gosh, that was like just in time for me. That was great. I was preparing for my first strengths trainings, and it was super useful to have that, and I could kind of get a sense of what was happening. And so we decided, gosh, it was a couple months ago now, that to do kind of the sequel to that. So basically what we did was say, okay, yeah, what's changed since then, since 2016 on that, and then talk a little bit about where do you go next after strengths trainings? After you've done kind of basic strengths education, where do you go next with that? And one of the things I did was kind of break it down into kind of 4, if I would tell you, just kind of 4 directions around it. One is breadth. Expanding the breadth, one is expanding the depth, one is on calibration, and another's on awareness, right? And I use those kind of shorthand ways of thinking about kind of as you were going to bucket the kinds of activities that you would include. Those are the kind of activities that you would include. And we spent the first one kind of introducing the topic on this one. That was two sessions ago. Last time, I think we talked a lot about breadth and depth. And as we kind of got into it, like I didn't even realize. I think we thought we were going to wrap it up that time, and we kind of got into it and had some great questions. And so we thought, okay, let's do a part 3 and talk about calibration and awareness. So here's what I thought we'd do today is I want to go back, talk a little bit, give a little bit of context around advanced strengths trainings. I want to talk about calibration and awareness just so people have a sense of what that is. And then I was like, I kind of want to do a little bit of an ask me anything, right? So around relative to the topic of strengths trainings. So I'd love to, I'm looking at the roster on chat. I feel like I've seen everybody just in the last couple of weeks here with the Strength Summit, right? So, but I'd love to just do like whatever questions people have or like that, I think would be super, super great to do. So that's kind of what I was thinking about today. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great, Dean. Let's dive in. And as we think about calibration, let's continue that.
Okay.
That thought.
Great. Yeah, no problem. The so here's in advanced strength training, I will tell you, let me give you a little context on this because I think this is a really important piece as you're thinking about strength training. One of the things I've noticed as I've talked to companies that are implementing strengths in their organization, right? And you really see this with organizations, is there's a lot of in the beginning it's like, hey, we're having everybody do Clifton Strengths, so everybody takes the assessment, yay, and everybody's got their they know their top 5 or they know their first 10 or whatever, and we've got a nameplate on everybody's door or whatever that is, so it starts to get in the culture, and a lot of the education is education that's kind of oriented around building awareness, building appreciation of strengths in the organization. So it's like, hey, am I aware of my own themes? Am I aware of other people's themes? Am I, and do I appreciate that? Do I know what all the themes are? A lot of the early education is really oriented that way. And do I appreciate that? And do I start to know how to kind of partner with people around that? There's a lot of sort of discovering the themes and discovering myself and unpacking all that, right? And that's really, really important early work to do. The problem that we run into is in the work that we do is it kind of stops there. So what you see in a lot of organizations is we get it's like, okay, I know my themes. Okay, I know their themes. Now what happens? And people don't know where to go. It sounds like a funny thing, but people don't know where to go from there. It's this thing where they're like, okay, we did that. Now what happens? And everybody gets stuck. And I will tell you, great, sophisticated OD people get to that point and they're like, okay, what do we do next? And I think that's where you all as coaches who are going in and coaching people and doing training with people in organizations can help people move to that next piece. And that next piece really, I always like to think about that next piece as really helping people with application and helping people with deeper development. So it's really thinking about how, now that I'm aware of my strengths, now that I know what they are, I'm aware of my talent themes, I'm developing them into strengths, I've got that great awareness, and I've got an appreciation for those, and not only mine, but others, then how am I applying them against outcomes and goals and performance objectives? How am I actually using my talents and my strengths to actually accomplish things that take my performance to the next level? If you take a step back, strengths development should be your ticket to being world-class. So this is really your ticket. The whole intent of all strengths was based on a study of excellence, right? Where was there consistent near perfect performance? Where was there success that people had? Right? So the whole idea here is we're helping people accomplish what they want to be successful in. We're helping people achieve deliver performance that's world-class, that's really excellent. So we want to make sure that what we're doing is we're up under that process. And what you start to see is you start to see people have that awareness and they've got that appreciation, but they haven't crossed that divide to say, how do I apply that? I want to tell you, I do think that one of the things that happens, and we talk about this a lot in the Advanced Strengths Coaching course, right, is this notion of this moment where we decide, hey, I'm going to focus on my strengths. And I'm going to choose to focus on my strengths, right? And I'm going to start investing in them. We call that developmental milestone, focus and invest. And it's really that moment where I make a conscious choice. Hey, I'm going to focus on my talent themes. I'm going to focus on my strengths. Part of making that choice and why there's always a little bit of a crisis around it is because I've got to stop claiming to have strengths I don't have. It's the moment where I give up being well-rounded. It is for some people, it's like a crisis, right? That shows up. It's like that moment where I say, okay, I'm no longer going to be well-rounded. I'm giving that up in service of what I can be, of where my strengths can take me, right? And that's a really important moment for people. And you really see it's like a maturity moment where people say, hey, look, I really do want to be world-class. I really want to focus on what I'm great at. So I'm going to make that choice and I'm really going to invest in those things, right? So beyond the basic strengths education, in advanced strengths education, there's really those 4 kind of dimensions that you go through. Breadth is the first one, right? And again, that really helps me make sure I'm understanding all of the strengths themes that are out there, right? And that I really understand what they are. And I always, I've talked about this before, but I think it's really important as we're doing that, that one is people get really clear about when do I see, what are the traits inside that theme, and when do I see that happening? I always like to go back to Don's 5 clues to talent around that one. And I think that one of the things just to keep in mind when you're expanding breadth, so that as those activities like, hey, where do we see deliberative? Where do we see activator? Where do we see achiever? Where do we see intellection? Where do we see empathy? Right? As we start to be able to in breadth, to be able to spot those, right? We want to make sure that we're focusing on what is the contribution of each theme. So what you sometimes see in organizations is that as people start learning all the themes, they do become labels for people, right? It's like, oh, you need to manage your activator, or you need to stop with that deliberative. Like, it becomes a label. And so one of the things in your education, in the coaching that you do, that's so important is, as you're teaching people all the themes and you're helping people to recognize those themes, is that you're really focusing on what is the contribution of that theme. What is the value that brings? Because that's so important to be able to unlock in your training and development with people, right? The second piece is depth, and that's really unpacking all the traits in a theme. So really making sure that people know it's, and this is another area, it's like, I think we all know, hey, people that are competitive want to win, right? But that's not all they are. And that's not all that theme tells us. And so part of it is we really want to make sure we're unpacking that so we understand the world that each one of those talent themes are. And one of the things I've done in the past is with coaches, I've said to you, hey, it's great to read that description so you're really clear about all the traits that are included in that description, and then helping people to be able to correctly identify those. And there's lots of activities we've talked about in the past for helping with breadth and depth. What it's building for us is that deep appreciation of each one of the themes and the understanding of the breadth of the different themes that we've got, right? And all of that is a basis for, as you're doing education, a lot of clients, when we talk to clients, they say, gosh, we want to do a team session. And what they're out to do is to be able to enhance collaboration, enhance partnerships, come up with greater levels of efficiency and effectiveness. And so the desire is right, but we've got to help them to understand that people don't really have anything to say in a team session till they understand their own talent themes and their own strengths, and they really understand what those strengths are. So we need to help people to be able to say, hey, what the value that I bring is this, the contribution that I have is this, here's how that manifests itself. And so we've got to start with that piece first. Before then I can say, here's how I work with the other members of this team, and here's the ways that we can partner in that are really meaningful for us. So that whole piece, right? So we got to make sure we got enough of that before we're ready to be able to do that, right? Then the last two pieces, and these are the last two pieces that I wanted to make sure we talked about today. One is collaboration and one is awareness. So I want to unpack those a little bit so you have a sense of, like, what do I mean by that? And then a little bit about how do you do that in strengths trainings, right? So collaboration, but not collaboration, calibration. Calibration is helping increase the precision with which people are able to apply their themes and produce consistent near perfect results. And again, you can't really start talking about calibration until people actually understand their own talent themes, have started developing them into strengths, and then have identified goals and outcomes that they want to apply their talents against. So with calibration, it's all about increasing my effectiveness in the way I apply my talents so that I can legitimately have a strength in that area. I've got consistent near perfect results there. One of the earliest and best ways to be able to enhance calibration is the thing that Don Clifton gave us, right? Which, when he talked about studying your successes. So one of the simplest, most obvious exercises is to be able to say, hey, think of a recent success. Now let's look at, how did you use your talent themes in order to be able to accomplish that? What were the themes that were in play? How did you actually use them? What was effective? What was not effective? Studying our successes really helps us to understand our themes in play. This is also a great exercise to do with a team. So as we think about the team goals that we've accomplished, let's go back and unpack that success. And it's a really simple conversation that any manager can really have with a team, or that you can plug into a team session that you would do, is to be able to say, hey, what's a recent goal that we had or recent success that we accomplished? What was a goal that we had recently that we can look at? Now let's unpack what worked, what didn't work about it. How did we use our themes? What were the ways we partnered around our themes here? Is to really start to unpack that is really, really, really useful, so that people can see on the court how they're applying their themes. Makes sense? Great. The other thing is to really look at to be able to look at what am I doing consciously to set up the environment in order to succeed. So part of it is to be able to say, hey, as I'm using my themes individually or on a team, how are we conditioning the environment, or how are we setting up the environment so it's set up for our success? So what do we need? How do we need to set up the environment? What are the requests we need to make? What are the structures we need to have in place? What are the ways that we know we need to set it up so that we can work around that, so that we're really successful in that? So part of it is, as we think about calibration, we're not just thinking about how am I individually or we corporately using our strengths, but also how we're setting up the environment that supports the utilization of our strengths. And what do we need to do in order to be able to do that? That's a really key piece of this, and to be able to unpack it. Another aspect of this is really thinking about theme dynamics. And as you get into it, particularly as you think, the way I like to talk about theme dynamics is first at an individual level, and then looking at it in a team, right? Because I think it's helpful as you work with people around theme dynamics. I think the very first thing is understanding, how do my themes combined, right, to make me the person that I am? So how do I use my focus and my strategic together, right? My focus helps me prioritize. It points me at the outcome. My strategic helps me think about, how are we going to get there, and think about all the different ways that we could get there. So I think when I'm always teaching theme dynamics, I always start with the individual to think about, okay, how are these themes kind of working together with me? How do they collaborate together? And then I like to be able to then kind of build from there. The next step I typically take around theme dynamics is complementary partnerships. So how am I using this theme and contributing that to our partnership? How are you using that theme and contributing to our partnership? So how do we use that together? And remember, there's a little bit of mischief around complementary partnerships. Sometimes people think in complementary partnerships that it's about your strength compensates for my weakness. That's not what we mean by complementary partnerships. Complementary partnerships are how does my strength combine with your strength to create something that's bigger than both of them, right? How am I using what I'm great at? How am I using what I'm great at, and you're using what you're great at, and we're combining those together in meaningful ways to have to create an outcome that's bigger than both of us, right?
Dean, do you have any thoughts on that exercise to get people there? Because I think that's sometimes we have a lot of tools. We have the book Theme Dynamics, Expanding Your Strengths. We've got some in the course content. There's some pairings. We've got some information on the theme dynamics cards that help people do that kind of stuff. But can you talk a little bit about how to get people there, especially in group settings?
Yeah, I like to try to do it in a really, ultimately what you want people to be able to do. Where you're going with this is, people can say, hey, I contribute this and I contribute this, and they say I contribute this, and that the conversation feels organic. But in the beginning, the conversation is not going to start organically, right? Because it's an awkward conversation. It's not we're not used to, and particularly in most organizational cultures, it's not like, hey, I'm great at this. Hey, that's not the beginning of the conversation in a lot of organizational cultures, right? So I always call it kind of doing theme math. You know what I mean? It's like my theme plus your theme equals this, right? So I like to I mean, it's a super simple exercise, but I like to have people do a little theme math in the beginning to say, okay, Jim, you're going to pick one theme from your top 5. Okay. And you're going to think about how you use that theme as a strength. Okay. I'm going to pick one theme from my top 5, right? And I'm going to think about how I use that theme as a strength. Then we're going to share that with each other. And then look to see if we were going to combine that theme with this theme, how would we point it at goals that we care about, right? And so you're literally sort of it feels a little in the beginning. It's a little I was gonna say awkward, but it seems a little structured, I guess, in the beginning. It doesn't feel natural and organic, but it's helpful to just take one theme of yours and one theme of mine, and we're gonna put them together, right? So and again, you want to focus on what's the expression of that theme as a strength. And how are we going to take the expression of your theme as a strength, the expression of my theme as a strength, put them together, and then point them at an outcome to say, okay, how would we bring this to bear together as an outcome, right? It's like I lead with a lot of activator. I'm going to help us think about how we take our ideas and bring them into action, right? I'm going to help translate them into actions that I think will advance this goal. I'm going to create a lot of energy and urgency around it. You're going to take your command and create a lot of clarity and help make sure that everybody's clear about how we're going to do that. And everybody knows what their role is and make sure that they're clear about their role, so we're all working together around it. And that's how together you and I will be a power of 2 using my theme and your theme to be able to do that. Right. So having that dialogue, it sounds funny, but I've done that just with a ton of groups, literally all over the world, to do that kind of simple math. And it starts there, and it starts to get us kind of in the groove of talking about, here's how I contribute my themes, here's how you contribute your themes, right?
Yeah. Do you find there's a tool that you use that works, when we physically think about starting that conversation, writing it down, however?
Yeah.
You have any tips or advice on that?
In terms of the tool of it, I think one is it's predicated on that people know their themes, right? So you got to have that. If I say, hey, pick a talent theme and how do you use that as a strength, and you have trouble answering that question, that means that there's some work we should have done before then. Right. And there's lots of work. I mean, I think, you were just holding up, like, we have the Clifton Strengths Discovery cards. We have Theme Insight cards. We've got lots of tools out there that people can use around that. But it's predicated on, as I said earlier, breadth and depth. Right. I know what my themes are. And I know the piece that's often catches people. And I noticed, like, some of the Facebook groups, there's a lot of chatter about this, right? Is we as coaches make a regular, I'm gonna go on a slight tangent, but I'm coming back. Okay. We as coaches make a rigorous distinction between talent and strength, right? Because we want to be able to say, because we're thinking about it in a way that's through the lens of human development, right? I have a talent theme. There's traits inside that talent theme. I understand that talent, and that talent has been identified by Clifton Strengths. And then I'm going to develop that talent into a strength where I can exhibit consistent near perfect results. Sometimes the shorthand on it is, hey, what are your strengths? Right. And I think sometimes we get overly rigorous about it, where it's like, no, that's not a strength, that's a talent, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like a game of takeaway with people. I think it's fine to have a little bit of latitude to say, hey, what are your strengths? Right. I think as we're developing people, we want to help people to be able to say, hey, the application of that talent is in this area. And as you build, how do you know you got to strengthen that area? Because you're building results in that area. Right. But I think we got to manage that. We're not trying to outrigger people so that we take away their discussion of strengths. Right. And so I think we want to get back to the point on theme dynamics here. I think it starts with people really understanding each theme and the depth of each theme and what the other themes are, being able to say what the contribution is that they provide and how do they use that on the court. Right. And so lots of conversations in the past about what the themes are, guessing which theme it is, being able to identify some of the traits that live inside of a theme. All those things are super important. Being able to study my own successes and say, how do I use my themes successfully? right? When I've done that, and then we start to have a conversation about how are we gonna partner together around our themes, I'm really well equipped to be able to do that. And I can really point that the thing that we want to start to get in the where this all gets super meaningful is when we're using it to accomplish goals that we care about, right? That's the point of this whole thing, is how are we using this to accomplish the things that we care about in life? How are we doing this to elevate our performance, to elevate the kind of outcomes that we can produce, right? So when I'm teaching those theme dynamics, again, the progression for me is it starts with individual. How do my themes combine together to make me who I am? How does my focus work with my strategic? How do those work together inside me, right? That to produce results. Then the next is a partnership. How do my themes work with your themes? And and starting with pick a theme, you pick a theme, I pick a theme. We're going to combine those and talk about how they hit a goal. And then we can start to talk about the team. Right. So then we can go and say, hey, how do our themes work together? And that's where a team grid starts to be really valuable for us, right? Where we can look at the combination of themes, we can look at the dominant themes, we can look at the themes that are not so prevalent. And so, and what we start to discover when we look at a team grid and particularly look at it through the lens of domains is we understand our biases, right? Hey, we're heavy on execution themes. We got a bias for action. Right? Doesn't mean that we don't have relationships, doesn't mean that we don't influence other people, but the way that we tend to have relationships is around the things we're doing together. The way we influence people is through the work that we do and our responsiveness and sense of responsibility around that. Right. So you start to be able to then expand it to a team domain. Right. So again, individual, interpersonal, and then team, I think is kind of the progression for really helping people understand that. And I think as you're having conversations as coaches and trainers, it's predicated on some work that you've done before. But as you help people with that, those are conversations you can have inside of teams that are really powerful conversations. And you look at some of the people who are really great at working with teams. Like I always think about Maureen Monty, and she wrote that book, Destination Unstoppable. She's just great at working with teams. And this is the kind of thinking she's bringing to bear to help teams be real successful.
Dean, how important is the follow-up on this? We spend an enormous amount of time talking about the team sessions of doing this.
Yeah.
How important is that follow-up afterwards, the after action, the game film, those kinds of pieces? How important is that in making sure there's follow-up and accountability in this?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, but that sustainment piece is so important, right? So we know that, learning people are all about integration. Right. So we're all about how are we, I always think about it like the Borg, you know what I mean? In Star Trek, you know what I mean? Sorry, my geekiness just flying right out. Right. But it's like the osmosis of there's something that you're learning. There's something that you're understanding. Right. And you're bringing that into your behavior and it gets absorbed into your behavior so that it's naturally sort of integrated into who you are. And that process of integration is one that, all learning people are excited about, is how do we facilitate that process of integration? How do we enhance that process? How do we make sure? And retention is a big thing, right? Do we have, if you look at the Kirkpatrick levels, do we have a great learning experience in the moment that feels like it's engaging and inspiring and exciting to participate in, where I'm awake and paying attention, right? But part of it is those touch points then after the fact that help me retain that information. And so do we have the right touch points? And we also know, and this has been demonstrated in a lot of different venues, but we also know that multi-mode learning helps increase both retention and integration over time. So when I'm using multiple modes to be able to reinforce that, so I might go to a course where it's instructor-led, I'm in a group setting, I'm learning in one mode, but then that's supported by like job aids that help remind me of things I should be doing. or help me with like a just-in-time video that helps me to be able to understand, okay, here's what I should do in that situation. Or one-on-one coaching where I can ask the questions that I have. So I can make sure in a one-on-one situation, hey, how does that apply to me? Here's where I got hung up. That kind of, I can get unstuck from some of that stuff, right? Or cohort calls that are small groups where we're learning from each other, and that's facilitated by a coach. So part of it is when we're thinking about teaching that stuff into people and organizations, part of it is designing a program, not just an experience, right? So we're designing a program that's designed to help people over time. There's touch points that help people with that application thing. So, and remember, all learning is really essentially three things. There's knowledge transfer. I'm learning something I didn't know before. That there is skills development. I'm practicing it. So I'm practicing doing those things. And sometimes that practice is awkward at first, right? But then we gain facility over time. And the third is behavior change. How does this then get integrated into the way I behave and the way I act? And so it feels like organic, and an organic part of what I'm doing, right? Sort of that unconscious competence, right?
Yeah, and Dean, don't you think? I mean, so oftentimes in the settings, we think about all the prep and all the talking to teams, but we miss the step of coming back around to see what they actually did. What actually happened when you did that? And then repeat that same cycle, right? Let's go through, have awareness of this. How did we do? How are we successful? What were the best parts of it? What can we repeat? And what should we jettison? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jim, to the point you're making, guys, it's such a great point, Jim. It's what you see a lot is people going back, and they're trying to confirm. It goes back to what I said in the beginning. They're trying to confirm understanding, awareness, appreciation. Hey, do you understand what this theme is? Hey, are you aware of it? Hey, do you appreciate this theme in other people? Right. As opposed to thinking about, hey, how did you apply those themes? Right? What results did you produce? How'd that turn out? Right? Because that's what calibration is about, is do I have successful strategies for applying my themes in meaningful ways and then producing the right results? So it's thinking about deconstructing our successes, or looking to, or unpacking our failures, right? To be able to say, hey, we were all working on this. It was an abysmal failure. Didn't work, right? And so here's what we need to unpack about that. So those are thinking about, like, I think the kind of development that you want once you get past people past that first level, right, is all of that kind of development that comes from, hey, we applied our talents. That starts to expose developmental needs that are different than just kind of awareness and appreciation, right? Those starts to understand. We start to understand, hey, you know what? I was applying the right strength, but I wasn't skillful in the way I was applying it. Or, hey, there were some critical pieces of knowledge we just didn't have, right? We need to really go understand this, and this, right? So this process piece, or this, right? So I think that sort of exposes those developmental needs. And again, we want our development focused on what we do best, right? So what we're looking at is how do we apply knowledge and skills development to those things that we do best.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we get impatient with the process. We do this one time, and then we kind of expect it to work perfectly out the door. When these are iteration pieces that have to happen, and I think people ask all the time, how do we keep strengths going? And they do expect, or they have super high expectations for the first intervention, and like all of a sudden now rainbows, sunshine, fairy dust, and unicorns.
Yeah.
And it can actually unearth some things that create more tension, that it can unearth more conflict that has to be worked through in these interventions that we have to keep coming back to it. So coaches, as you think about how do I keep this going, you need to schedule that next session to say, how did we do? Also have metrics available to measure too. Don't come out of those sessions with just the feel good of theme dynamics. Okay, we feel good about where we're going. How are we actually going to measure this? Like, how will we know we're being successful if you don't have that at the bottom line? And you guys are great at this, right? This is why you're coaches. But if you don't have that, the next session can be just a mess because nobody knows, were we successful or weren't we?
Yeah.
So
And Jim, I love that. Like I always say, as a learning guy, like if people got something, if people got something, if they mastered something the first time I said it to them, I wouldn't have a job. You know, what I mean? Like, it's like people need it over and over again, right? And I think we've got to stop measuring the success of our sessions by how do people feel at the end, right? But are people left in action at the end, right? How and we want people to feel good. Don't get me wrong. It's great when people feel good when they're excited, but what they should be excited about is how they're going to go apply this, right? How am I see access to something I want to accomplish that I didn't see access before, right? And then the follow-up is around that. I also think people pick up from us. I think we've got to be very conscious and explicit that when we think it's one and done, right? Hey, I'm going to do a team session, and then all the broken people will be fixed, and it'll be all good, right? People pick up from that expectation from us, right? So they're left with, hey, it must not have worked. We did the team session. It must not have worked. As opposed to really explicitly saying, hey, this is the beginning of a journey for you all, right? This is going to take lots of conversations that we're going to have together. You're going to have with each other. You're going to have even with other teams. Like this is the beginning of a lot of conversation, a lot of work that you're going to do to actually talk about how we're harnessing our talent and applying it around the things we care about, right? I want to quickly there's one question that was in chat that I want to make sure I hit just before we leave this calibration thing. And then I want to talk about awareness just for a minute, because what you just said was the perfect lead into that. So Mike Tobin asked a question: do you find it easier to focus on domains when coaching teams, especially when diving into team goals? Yes, yes, yes. So I think, Mike, with the domains, we introduced the domains in our strengths-based leadership book, right? And it was really based on a study of leaders and how leaders use their talents and sort of what their disposition was relative to the use of their talents, right? Am I a high influence leader? Am I an execution-oriented leader, and so on, right? I think there's sometimes when you introduce domains and you're just looking at them on an individual level, it's where people think that somehow they're handicapped, right? That they're like, hey, all my themes are thinking themes, I must be broken, right? Or, hey, all I've got is relationship themes and no execution themes, I'm never going to get anything done. No, it doesn't work that way, right? And when they look at it on an individual level, it is where a lot of that crazy mischief about something's wrong, right? And you never want people to emerge from a strengths conversation where they're left with something's wrong, right? You want people left with, no, something's right, And so we want to make sure that we're helping people with that. Where domains really have traction is in team conversations. And I'm not saying don't ever use it with leaders or don't ever use it with individuals, but where it really has traction is in team conversations. So, we know the disposition of the team.
It is a little counterintuitive sometimes when we say focus on strengths, figure out what people are good at, and then immediately have a domain conversation, and it gets well-rounded. Right. Yeah. And you go, oh, don't apply that same thing. Right. And like you're saying, in the context of teams is where that really works well. The individual pinpoint, laser focused teams. Yeah. We got to work on those teams and the team dynamics that exist there. Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's why we always say to people, it's not that some people, domains are really not part of what we include in basic strengths education. People don't really need the domains in the beginning, and sometimes they misunderstand what we intend by that, right? So it's not like you have to hide it from them. Like, no. Like paying no attention to the man behind the curtain. It's like, you don't have to hide it from them. But on the other hand, don't put the emphasis there, because particularly in the beginning, people get worried about what does this then mean? Right. And it's where when people have a better understanding of their own talents and strengths, and they start to understand the whole breadth of those talents and strengths, then as we introduce domains, it adds sort of depth to the conversation versus something that frames the conversation in a way that throws people off.
No, right on. So we don't have a part 4. Let's move on to awareness.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Oh, thank God. So the only thing I want to say about awareness, I think with awareness, it tends to be in kind of in two areas. I think where I would talk about today, and then we'll take some questions. Right. One is I think, and we talk about this a lot in both the ASC and then in the Advanced Strengths Coaching course, right? In the Accelerated Strengths Coaching course and then the Advanced Strengths Coaching courses. With theme awareness, we want to make sure we're understanding how our themes help us and how our themes hinder us. Right. Sometimes we've called that balconies and basements. Sometimes we talk about it as blind spots, but it's that place where we really understand how our themes are making a difference for us and how they're hindering us. Right. And part of what we're after in that arena is that balance between self-expression and self-regulation, is that ability that I can express my themes fully. I'm fully self-expressed in the way that I'm expressing my talent. I'm developing those talents into strengths that are helping me accomplish what I'm committed to accomplishing in my life, right? At the same time, I've got the right amount of regulation, so I'm able to get feedback and integrate the feedback and adjust as needed. And so I've got the right amount. I'm not over-regulating where I'm trying to hide my themes, or I feel like I can't express myself fully. I'm not over-regulating. There's the right amount of regulation to be able to make sure I'm sensitive to, in the expression of my themes, am I also supporting the expression of other people's themes, right? So it's that tension between self-expression and self-regulation, right? So that piece requires just a lot of awareness. And it's helping to understand it, like, is there the right amount of expression, and am I getting the right amount of feedback to help guide what I'm doing? The other thing that happens with strengths, as you develop your strengths, as you develop your talent themes into strengths, is that kind of awareness that starts to grow over time. There's times when, as I develop it, as my themes develop, there's a kind of situational awareness I need. In this situation, I need to use more of my this, right? So I need to use more of my communication than my command. I need to be able to employ this. So there's a right kind of situational awareness that I need as my themes develop and as I use them in different situations, so it's appropriate to that. And helping people to think, I mean, it sounds a little funny, but sometimes people have a little like one size fits all on their themes. It's like, well, I always use my da-da-da-da to do this, right? It's like, no, you want to read the environment and think about, where are you, where are they, and what's the right expression of that, right? So I think we want to make sure that happens relative to awareness. And part of that is facilitated, I think, by just great feedback, right? Are we always like listening for the feedback? Are we always, feedback's hard. The best feedback is the feedback that you didn't expect, the stuff you didn't see coming, right? But man, it can be like a punch in the nose sometimes, right? Is like, hey, I am speaking from personal experience. There's times when it's just like, gosh, it's hard, but development sometimes is hard. It's emotionally hard, right? And so, but as long as we're in an environment with people that love us and want to support our development and want to encourage us, then it can be always really productive, right? So, and a lot of that process is helping people then integrate that feedback so that they can go back and continue kind of the full expression of their themes.
Yeah, it's a difficult. No one comes out of a difficult situation going, "Oh man, that was just the greatest thing ever."
Right.
Let's do more of it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's hard, right? I will tell you, it's one of the things as we talk to organizations, it's the hardest thing I think managers have to do is be able to give meaningful feedback to people. And it's tough. It's tough to get right. And there's a lot of emotions that get tangled up in that and people's feelings of self-worth but on the other hand, that's the access to growth, right? Is at the end of the day, getting that feedback, that's really the access to growth. And we really need that as well, right?
Even in healthy organizations, and just thinking about our own here at Gallup, and post summit, we give each other a ton of feedback. Like that is a thing. And we everybody comes off of the event in a high, everybody's excited about what they're doing. We come off of it and then give each other all feedback. And sometimes the week after the summit is the most difficult week for that kind of development, because we've just gone through some major experiences where the feedback is very valid, very important. And you kind of go, yeah, I guess I do. I guess I do have some things to work on.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, sometimes that can just be that you have to kind of work through that and not be defensive, be able to say, hey, even as a coach, work through that with individuals, to be patient with them as they're grappling with this, oh man, I just did maybe the most important thing in my life, and I've got some things I need to continue to work on. So it's
yeah. Let me say something about that, how that works. Given that we're talking about strengths trainings, right? Let me talk about how that works when you're doing a training or doing theme sessions. I think it's great as you're working with teams, as you're working with folks, to one is as they think about feedback, there's the result we produce, and how do we measure the result? Did we accomplish what we intended to accomplish? Sort of like the quantitative piece of it, right? Did we hit the sales number? Did we hit the deadline? Did we do it on budget? Right. So there's the sort of the quantitative feedback that we've got that helps us gauge, were we successful? Then there's also the qualitative piece. And I think, and that's oftentimes where it's hard, is because, and I always like to ask people, what feedback have you received lately? If you're not getting any feedback, man, you probably need to start to ask for some more. Right. So at being able to say to individuals, to a team, hey, what feedback did you get recently? What feedback made sense to you? What was the feedback that didn't make sense to you? Right? Is there any feedback that you'd say you're resisting? Like they say this is true, but I don't believe it. Right? So like, why are you resisting that? Right? So I think it's an interesting thing, but to really, instead of just saying, hey, you need to go get feedback, I think to kind of explore that feedback, right? Because there's the feedback that we get that we would say, yeah, I saw that one coming, or I know that about myself, but I haven't really embraced that, or I know that about the way we work as a team, but we haven't really owned that, right? There's the piece that we don't like, and where there's an opportunity really to get into somebody else's world, to be able to say, we may not intend that. You know what I mean? And again, Jackie Merritt said to me once, and I think it's so true, people don't judge us by our intentions. They judge us by our results, right? So we may not have intended that, but if the result was such, we gotta be responsible for that, right? And then I often think sometimes with feedback, and this is the part that's most fun and interesting, and often sometimes most meaningful, is what's that stuff we're resisting? What's that feedback we're really resisting? You know what I mean? Where we just don't want that. And I think oftentimes there's something in there that is rich territory for development.
I think if I take one thing away from today's session, it's that question, Dean, of what am I currently resisting? Because the other ones are easy to fake, especially in a coaching session. Here's what I'm doing well. Here's what I'm not doing so well. But that's tied to the self-awareness of, what am I currently resisting? I think really gets to the heart of really where we have developmental opportunities, and where we can make it the biggest change. Yeah. No, I love that question.
I will tell you this is so simple, and I've done this with groups before, and it sounds so simple, but it's so powerful, is having people go to a piece of flip chart paper and write down the feedback that they're getting. Right? So what feedback are we getting as a team, and write it down, right? And it requires people to actually start to process that feedback, right? And get it out of themselves and on paper, and to be able to say, now let's look at that feedback. What's the feedback you think is great feedback, and what are we doing about it, right? What's the feedback we think is bad feedback, right? And how are we dealing with that misalignment or misperception, right? So do literally just that simple exercise to be able to say, hey, what is the feedback we're getting? Let's deal with it. It's so powerful,
I agree. We agreed to take some questions, or Can I throw a few at you? So
please.
Barbara asked earlier, how do I help a manager get the breath when they're the only one working on strengths on a team? Yeah. This is a one-on-one coaching engagement she has within a 50-person department.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. This is going to sound like don't have him be the only one. Don't have him or her be the only one working on strengths. You know what I mean? I think part of it is, it sounds like a silly answer, but part of it is one of the things you can start with, this is probably more the straight answer, is one is that person probably needs to advocate for strengths on their team. Like if they're really committed to the expression of their strengths. One of the things that we were talking about this the other day is I had a meeting last Thursday with the core group of people that lead our Clifton Strengths Discovery course. And I asked them, why is it in the afternoon that we ask people to go share their strengths? Like, why is it, right? And people are like, well, it's because we love strengths. We want everybody to know their strengths. No, that's not really it. Or, oh, it's so that we can test them to see, do they know their strengths well enough to be able to share them? No, it's not really that. It's so you can start to organize your environment to relate to you as your strengths rather than your weaknesses. So why we have people share is because it reorganizes their environment, right? So what we want people to, so this manager, by him or herself, right, in a 50-person department, if they're not sharing their strengths and they're, here's my strengths, here's the contribution. One is we want them just sharing so that the world starts to get reorganized around their strengths. Pretty much, I would tell you, if history proves to be the same, if history proves out, almost certainly people will start doing their strengths in that 50-person department, and all of a sudden you're going to have a pocket of strengths, strengths enthusiasts immediately, right? The other piece, though, Barbara, is the power of strength spotting. And this is something that I can do even if nobody around me has done strengths, where I can start to, based on sort of my understanding of what strengths are, is to be able to say, gosh, I bet that person is high and deliberative. Because what I notice that sort of process orientation. I notice that caution. I notice some of those things like that, where I would say, gosh, I notice that theme in play, right? So using strength spotting is a great way to kind of start that, that process is a super useful thing.
We know from podcasting, from the stuff I do here, that success breeds activity usually.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important in those situations that, you're a one-person team, that you're showing some success by doing it, because that will start attracting other people.
Yeah.
Right. If you really want to have that influence,
yeah.
you've really got to work it and have some extra accountability to be showing some, hey guys, this is really working for me.
Yeah.
Because people will ask, they'll ask that question, like, how are you doing this?
Yeah.
How are you having the success? That's the best question that you want to get in those scenarios, right?
That's exactly right. That's right. And I will tell you, just Barbara, in the situation you're in, I mean, the fact that this person, this person you're coaching has a coach and has a strengths coach is pretty great, right? I mean, and has a strengths coach like you, right? That's pretty great. So, that's indicative.
I think we're going to talk more about the manager too in the coming year or two, of that manager having an enormous amount of influence and being able to take it from the top down, if you want to use that terminology. I don't really like it that way, but because it's really kind of infecting the team with it. But using those principles to show the success through them and really leading. Right? If you're a leader, no one's following, you're not really leading. So,
that's right.
So I love that emphasis. I would not want to give up in that situation. And if you've got a hold of the manager, I think you've got a really good chance of infecting or affecting the team. Right?
Yeah.
Laura asked a question. She says, what action steps do you take to follow up after a team session? So if you were to give some practical follow-up things, we talked a little bit about this, Dean, but would you give any other suggestions on follow-up activities?
Yeah, I think here's the thing is, one is you want to leave people in action. So you want to leave people with an action they can take around it. And then you want to, you don't want to let loose of them until you get the next kind of thing scheduled, right? So some great follow-up is, hey, like one possibility is, hey, I'm going to do one-on-one calls with everybody. Right. So we're going to do this session and then I'm going to do one-on-one calls with everybody, or one-on-one calls with key people, the manager of the team, some of the key stakeholders on the team, like where we're going to do that kind of follow-up to make sure, hey, let's check in. How did that go for you? What are you doing? What have you done since then? Here's some of the actions you said you wanted to do, like that. Group calls or cohort calls are also really, really good. And so, and where you say, hey, look, let's take a pod, with like Barbara's example about the 50-person team. Hey, if we take a pod of folks that we would say, hey, after a session, hey, we're going to go work with that pod and do some cohort calls around that. That would really, I think, make a difference around it. We want to leave people with tools, right? And I always think that that's super useful. The other thing is also using technology, right? So being able to say, sending people emails or asking people to send you an email as a follow-up email to say, hey, how's it going? Let me know how it's going. Oftentimes those are great time savers in terms of making sure you're touching base with everybody, because you can power through that. Using platforms like Zoom or other kind of web-based platforms to do Google Hangouts, to do kind of conferencing with people, video conferencing with people. So there's lots of things that you can do around that to set up touch points, right? Before you might get together with that whole group again. So those are some of the things that you might think about as you're working with folks, right?
Dean, one more question, or let me ask a question as we may wait for maybe one more to come in here.
Yeah.
When you think in your experience, we've done a lot of work around this idea, this next generation, these millennials who are in the workplace right now.
Yeah.
As I go out and work with them on college campuses and in young professionals, I get the feeling that they're a little more in tune to this idea of strengths-based development right off the bat. In other words, they don't struggle with maybe the baggage of the Gen Xers or even the baby boomers before that of some of these ideas we talked about. Would you agree or disagree that you feel like this generation may be more aware and we don't need to spend as much time overcoming that objection? Sometimes we spend an enormous amount of time evangelizing that idea. Right?
Yeah.
That idea that focusing on weaknesses is not of value and really focusing on strengths is. In some presentations, I've seen it covered for up to a half an hour trying to convince people. And I think this current generation is just more open to it. Would you have any comments on that?
Let me give you some crazy comments on this. Okay. I think that one of the things if you look from our research, first of all, that this generation, or the way the workforce is changing, the way the workforce is changing, we know that millennials comprise a significant part of the workforce and continue to expand in terms of the percentage of the workforce that they comprise, right? We also know that their relationship with organizations is a little different relationship with organizations, where they expect that they're going to go to work and get developed at work. That they expect they're going to go to work and there's going to be opportunities to learn and grow. And that in fact, that as part of that, they're going to get coached. And they're going to get coached not just once a year, but on an ongoing basis. They're going to get coached in developing. So it's a different kind of relationship with work. It's a different relationship with the organization than maybe other generations have. And it's not, by the way, I think sometimes we hear this in the wrong way. It's not that other generations didn't want that or didn't need that. I think that it's that with millennials, it's been more of a fundamental expectation. And as they reshape the workforce, I think it meets the needs of other generations who weren't thinking that way, but wanted that all along. Right. So I think it's a really net positive thing. I do think that this generation tends to think through a lens of talent more. There's more of a disposition. And this is my opinion, not based on research. Right. But I think this generation tends to think, because they grew up like emphasizing their talent. And sometimes people sort of make fun of that, right? You know what I mean? Like, hey, you're talented, here's a participation ribbon. But I do think it's a fundamental difference is to grow up and know, hey, I have talents and I'm going to express those talents. I think it's a very positive way to be able to look through that lens at my talents and the expression of my talents and to look at other people that way. I do think that there's still a need for strengths development, though. So there's a difference between I've got talents and I want to express them, and then I'm expressing them in ways that yield consistent near perfect performance, right? So I think one of the cool things that we can contribute to this generation is how do we help you refine your talents? How do we help you express your talents in ways that make a meaningful impact on your communities in the world? Right. And so I think that need for strengths development doesn't diminish in any way, even as there is already a predisposition toward talent.
Dean, I think that's a good way to wrap it. Any other final thoughts before we close up?
No, I think this is a great topic. I'd love to have more questions and comments around this. I think, the work that all of you are doing as coaches and educators is so valuable. I always like to think about, we have basically about 2 million people a year doing Clifton Strengths. And now we'll have 2 million people a year doing Clifton Strengths and getting all 34. We only have, I think, like 5,700 certified coaches, right? There is a huge gap in terms of the number of people that are getting exposed to Clifton Strengths and the number of people that are available to coach them. And so you're doing really important work. And I think we just have to, we just need to support you in any way that you can. Okay.
Great way to wrap it and kind of put a bow on this. We'll continue to feature Dean throughout the rest of the year on these. If you're new to this, Dean actually has his own playlist on YouTube. So you're a big deal, Dean. I just want to let you know that. And head out to if you just go to YouTube and search Gallup Strength Center, you'll find our site. And Call the Coach Theme Thursday, the Call the Coach here, where Dean gets a chance to come and teach, has his own playlist. You can subscribe to that, get notifications whenever it's available. Dean, thanks for your time, and thanks for coming out and really teaching in these matters. Appreciate it.
Jim, thank you so much.
You bet. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center. Just gallupstrengthcenter.com. Send us your questions or comments. You can send those to us. By the way, if you want to get an email into Dean, just send it to coaching@gallup.com. Just put Dean in the subject line. They will get that routed over to him. Easiest way to remember how to do it. You can catch the recorded version of this. All of our programs are available off of our coaches blog. So just go to coaching.gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, like Dean mentioned, you can also see a list of all of our courses that lead to that certification. They're available on our courses page. Just go to courses.gallup.com. And we would love to have your questions out there on those courses as well. If you want to see a list of all the webcasts that we do, they're on our Eventbrite page now, gallup.eventbrite.com. Join us in our Facebook group, about 11,000 in that group. And if you want to be a part of that conversation, head out to facebook.com/groups/called-to-coach, TO. We'll get you there, and we'll get you in the program. I want to thank you for joining us today. We'll be back with more Called to Coach throughout the rest of the year. We appreciate it. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.